Hello, my true crime buddies. Welcome to another episode of my true crime. I would just like to say a big thank you to all of you guys who are enjoying it. More and more people are coming across that I do my true crime. It's not something that I push because it's not everyone's cup of tea. But it turns out more of you are fanatical about true crime, like me, that are starting to tune in, and you're going back through all my episodes, which is awesome. It makes me feel very good, and yeah, enjoy. Today, I was talking about a case, but I think I need more time to work it out a little bit more. There's a couple of... I can't talk about true crime enough. I keep seeing all these cases and I so want to talk about them all, but I will forever be recording. So, yeah, I'm going to try and do more of them. It's just finding the time because I have to diamond paint and chat and talk about these things. So today I thought we'd go a little bit more light-hearted because we've gone quite heavy for the last couple of weeks, last couple of episodes, especially Sylvia. That one nearly broke me, I'll be honest. It was so sad and tragic and violent and brutal. So today my title always gives me away. But today I want to talk about people that have been wrongfully convicted. And a case I want to talk about is, I can't remember his surname, but I watched a documentary on Netflix and I want to talk about him. And I have a lot of personal opinions on that one. So stay tuned for that. So today we are going to delve into a couple of wrongfully convicted, innocent people who the police seem to set their sights on and make the evidence fit that person, even though it completely doesn't. And it boggles my mind how they can do this. But let's get into it. Okay, so the first person I want to talk about is Ellis Wayne Felker. He was actually executed on November the 15th in 1996. And this is the perfect example of a corrupt system at work and a complete miscarriage of justice. According to the records, Ellis was considered a suspect in the disappearance of Evelyn Joy Lundslum in 1981. Evelyn was a cocktail waitress who was doing all she could to support herself through college, and the suspect was put under a police surveillance for a couple of weeks. And during this time, Evelyn's body resurfaced. Evelyn was found dead, raped and stabbed. The authorities underwent an autopsy to determine the time of death, and after realising that the truth would eliminate Ellis as a suspect, they requested a second autopsy that incriminated Ellis. And the tragedies don't stop there. During the trial, the presiding judge told Ellis's attorneys that, quote, his right to a fair trial had been severely compromised, end quote. And this meant that somebody wanted him to take the fall. But in spite of the enormous efforts made by the defence attorneys, Ellis was found guilty and executed at the age of 48. Even after they had found a written confession by another suspect and also some boxes of evidence that had been unlawfully withheld, the Supreme Court of Justice denied Ellis a new trial, and this meant no chances for exoneration. Ellis was the first wrongfully convicted defendant in history to be exonerated after his death, when a Georgia judge accepted to retest the DNA on the withheld evidence. How appalling is that on its own? So the DNA didn't match. There was a written confession, which even if it was, which it wasn't, but even if it was a fake confession, they have to look into it and rule it at least. Charles Hodzbeth. The execution of Charles is a truly horrific example of failure in justice. He's in this list of wrongfully convicted criminals. So what happened? In the year 1886, George Watkins and his wife Rebecca moved from Kansas to Arkansas. Soon after, Rebecca became intimately involved with Charles. A year later, George Watkins vanished from his home. After waiting a while, the wife came to the conclusion that her lover must be the one responsible for the horrendous act. During those years, crimes for love were a normal occurrence. I mean, I don't know what they mean by those years, because it's also these years where love are some of the reasons why people commit crimes. But okay, so in those years that was quite a normal thing, apparently, especially among people with anger management issues. Again, it could still relate in 2021. So it didn't take long for the unsuspecting lover boy to be found guilty. Charles was sentenced to death by the Arkansas Supreme Court based on Rebecca's testimony. The funny thing is that in 1888, the court reconsidered his conviction and set it aside after Rebecca's testimony was barred for lack of good character. So Rebecca was a naughty one. Upon retrial, Charles was again found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The execution happened on December the 30th in 1892. The reasons for which this case is a horrific example of failure in justice is because only a few months after his death, somebody found George Watkins alive and well in Kansas. Apparently, the man found out about his wife's, quote, hobbies and decided to leave without saying a word. So there was nobody. He was alive and well. And poor old Charles, who got involved with his wife, along with many others by accounts. That's truly shocking. Okay, Johnny Frank Garrett. He is on my list, and I will delve into this one a little bit more later down the road. But out of all of the wrongful executions, This one will definitely send shivers down your spine. It's not often that people claim they are innocent until the very end. Most of them confess their crimes once they know that it's inevitable. The death sentences come in. Normally by now people have sort of gone, yeah, okay, you got me. But Johnny Frank Garrett was one of those people who refused to plead guilty even when things seemed hopeless, and his last words were actually, quote, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me, and the rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving ass because I am innocent." End quote. Johnny was accused on October the 31st in 1991 for the rape and murder of a 76-year-old nun, Sister Tadia Benz. At that time, Garrett was 17 years old, and according to a forensic psychiatrist, he admitted to the crime. Nevertheless, the expert stated that the convict was suffering from severe brain damage and multiple personalities. Apparently, only one of the personalities admitted to the crime, and the rest of them did not remember the confession. Furthermore, there was no tapes with the confession. Ignoring the pleas to exonerate him, Johnny was found guilty and was executed on February the 11th in 1992. Just from the top of my head, from the research that I did into this, he was 17 here, but he had the mind of like a toddler. He was very mentally disabled, and that's what I thought it was strange just reading the surface that this 17-year-old had gone in and killed, and I think she was raped, I'm not 100% sure, but this 76-year-old, it just didn't jibe with me. And I know 17-year-olds do rarely, but it just seemed a bit of a far-fetch for me. But he was innocent. It was only 12 years later that I can't pronounce this, he's like Italian or something, we'll just call him Leon. He was found guilty for the rape and murder of an elderly woman. The crime occurred 4 months after the attack on Sister Benz. In addition, both cases presented similar evidence on the crime scene. Leon later confessed to the crimes and also claimed he was guilty for the death of Sister Benz. Unfortunately, it was too late to make any difference and is now on my list of wrongfully convicted criminals. Carlos de Luna. Carlos was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and unfortunately this mistake cost him his life. In February 1983, a woman called Wanda Lopez was stabbed to death during a night shift at a gas station where she was working. The police underwent a short manhunt, and during it they found Carlos hiding under a pickup truck. The reason for which Carlos was hiding was because he had been drinking, and this behaviour couldn't be accepted from a convict released on parole. The police considered that once guilty, you're always guilty. So they ignored the fact that Carlos didn't have a single drop of blood on him, although the crime scene was a bloodbath. The trial is another example of sloppy work done by the criminal justice system. The only eyewitness to the crime, a man called Kevin Baker, stated that Carlos is the criminal. Carlos said that the man... Carlos de Luna said that a man called Carlos Hernandez was the one responsible for the crime because he had been spotted inside the facility. He had a history of knife attacks and also a romantic history with Wanda Lopez. Unfortunately, the two looked very similar, and it was possible for the eyewitness to confuse them. Although many things pointed directly to Hernandez, who was actually bragging to his friends that he killed the woman on December 1989, Carlos was executed at the age of 27. Number 5 in my wrongly convicted criminals is Lionel Herrera. Quote, "I am innocent. I am an innocent man, and something very wrong is taking place tonight." End quote. These are the last words of Lionel. Fifth in my list of wrongfully convicted criminals who was executed by lethal injection in 1993. His case is a very twisted one indeed, and although he was found guilty in January 1982, he filed a petition in federal court. The man was accused of 2 murders. One of them happened on the night of September 29th in 1981. The victim was a public safety officer, David Rucker, and he was murdered near the Rio Grande Valley Highway. As it turns out, another police officer called Enrique Carrizales pulled over a speeding vehicle at approximately the same time and was shot by the driver. With his last breath, he identified Lionel as the person responsible for shooting him. The reason for which it is believed that the man was actually innocent is the confession of his brother, Raul, who stated that he was the one responsible for the 2 murders. In several affidavits forwarded by an attorney that represented Lionel's brother, there was assumed to be more evidence that would exonerate Lionel. However, the Supreme Court considered that the new evidence did not violate the Constitution's 8th Amendment, and Lionel was executed, even though the brother did it. Brings a whole new meaning to take one for the team. Okay, number 6, Mahmoud Hussein Matan. This is the case. He's from Somalia, and he experienced countless acts of racism since he moved to Cardiff. In the year 1952, Mahmoud was accused of murdering Lily Volpert, a woman who was ambushed in his house. She was killed after the killer slit her throat with Mahmoud's razor. The criminal made sure to add some of the victim's blood on Mahmoud's shoes, and that was more than enough for the police to find him guilty of the crime. As if this evidence wasn't enough, the Valport family, they also paid a criminal to testify at the trial. Mahmoud was sentenced to death by hanging in the Cardiff prison. It was only years later that the fake witness was found trying to kill his own daughter with a straight razor. This led to a confusing situation, and after Mahmoud's conviction was overturned in 1998, his family received £725,000 in compensation. And that's the first one we've had where there's actually been a sorry, here's some compensation. And I know it's not going to bring Mahmoud back or anything else, but that's the first kind of... I always see compensation as an apology. So they're never going to hold their hands up. And thank you, Diamond Heart, for following me on Instagram. Yeah, they're never going to hold their hands up and go, oh, we messed this one right up. They never do that. Number 7, Leo Jones, who says that the justice system is not corrupt, has probably never heard of the tragic case of Leo Jones, yet another one of our wrongfully convicted criminals who was executed in the year of 1998. This man was accused of murdering a police officer known as Thomas, I'm going to go with, because there's no way I can pronounce his surname. So, police officer Thomas in Jacksonville, Florida. Leo was taken in for questioning a few days later. According to him, he agreed to sign a coerced confession after being interrogated by the police for hours without end. The people who questioned Leo were policemen that were forced out of their uniforms, also known as enforcers, who used to torture in order to get what they want. In 1997, a retired officer came forward and said that one of the men who forced the confession out of Leo beat him during his arrest. After this statement, dozens of witnesses came forward and said that another man was responsible for the murder of Thomas. As a matter of fact, even Florida Supreme Court Justice Leader Shaw said that there is something wrong with the case and that recent evidence on the matter cast serious doubt on Leo Jones's guilt. Shaw battled with the highest heavens to reopen the case, but this wasn't possible, and the victim was sentenced to death by electric chair on March the 24th in 1998. The only thing that he was left with before the sentence was carried out was a meal of his choosing. Cameron Todd Willingham. You'd think that modern times have put an end to such barbaric means of punishing people. But nay. One of the most recent tragedies occurred to Cameron, who was executed on February the 17th in 2004. Guess what for? A crime he did not commit. According to the records, a fire occurred at the defendant's house in 1991, and in it his 3 young daughters were killed. Authorities charged Cameron with the murders in an attempt to cover up the fact that he abused his girls. One thing I couldn't understand is why he was suspected of abusing his daughters when his own wife declared that he loved them very much. After countless laboratory tests, it was concluded that the porch near the girls' bedrooms had fire acceleration fluids applied to them that would allegedly prevent any attempts of rescue, although a specialist in the field disputed these claims. The Supreme Court of Justice refused to pardon Cameron and declared him, quote, an extremely severe sociopath, end quote. This declaration was based on Cameron's taste in music. He liked Iron Maiden and Led Zeppelin. During the trials, you're all psychopaths out there. How many psychopaths do we have? Put it in the comments. During the trials, the defendant was offered a bargain: plead guilty and receive a life sentence, which he not so graciously turned down. 5 years after he was put to death, the state of Texas ordered a re-examination that demonstrated Cameron's innocence. Now, not only is he accused of burning down his house, not only is he accused of killing his 3 daughters, but to be accused of abusing them as well. I don't even know where that came from. Shocking behaviour. Number 9. Reuben Cantu. Out of all of the sickening cases I have encountered, this one is one of the worst examples of justice being served. Reuben Cantu was charged with capital murder after he supposedly killed a San Antonio man during an attempted robbery. This case was problematic from the very beginning, and the prosecutor was well aware of this fact. He actually expressed his doubt on several occasions, but nothing could be done until it was too late. Juan Moreno, who pleaded against Reuben at first, confessed later that he was not the one responsible for the shooting, and the only reason why he pleaded against him is because he was afraid of the authorities, who pressured him into identifying Reuben as the killer. David Garza, which was Reuben's co-defendant during his trial, said, quote, "Part of me died when he died. You've got a 17-year-old who went to the grave for something he did not do. Texas murdered an innocent person," end quote. So what can we learn from this heartbreaking case? Never convict someone for murder based solely on the testimony of an eyewitness. To this day, authorities are not certain whether or not Reuben was actually guilty or not, and later statements are contradictory. Did Texas execute an innocent man? Number 10. Claude Jones. Another appalling case of wrongfully convicted that resurfaced was the case of Claude Jones, a man who was executed in the year 2000 for a crime, guess what, which he did not commit. Recent DNA tests have caused a wave of disagreement towards the sentence that was given 21 years ago. According to recent discoveries, the strand of hair that was found at the scene of the crime did not belong to Claude Jones, as it was initially considered, and this was the only piece of evidence that was used to determine the fate of another innocent man. During the trial, Claude's attorneys fought very hard to submit the strand of hair to DNA testing, but they were refused every time. To say that the man was framed would be cheeky, but it seems that this indeed was the case. The truth is, there was no technology for DNA testing available when Claude Jones was convicted, but by the time of his execution, it was possible to verify whether or not it belonged to him. Not even American President George Bush approved of his request, and in the end, the man was put to death. After a few years, Judge Paul Murphy ruled in favour of the DNA testing, which proved that the man was not guilty of the crime. Claude's son said that he feels very relieved to know that his father was innocent, and he also considers that there are serious cracks in the justice system, criminal justice system. So there you have it, guys. Shocking. Each one is very, very shocking, and it's scary to think that you can be convicted and sent to prison or death on the say-so of someone else, on no forensic evidence, and all the rest of it. It's really, really shocking. So thank you for joining me and keeping me company. And yeah, as always, leave your comments and your thoughts down below. I love interacting with you. And I shall see you in another episode of my true crime very, very soon. Stay safe out there. Bye.